I put out the call earlier this week on Patreon for your draft-related questions, and you guys did not disappoint. First question is both micro and macro at the same time. It's micro about Ashton Jeanty and macro about whether or not you should take a running back in the top 10 overall. This question is from Yakko Warner. He says, you kind of discussed this on the NFL Stock Exchange video, but it would be interesting to compare the process of Saquon Barkley at number 2 and Ashton Jeanty top 6. Sixth pick, by the way, is with the Raiders, which is why he's saying top 6. Now, the Giants could have traded down or selected Allen/Lamar, but took Saquon. If the Raiders took Jeanty, I don't think it is a bad pick because there wouldn't be a blue chip prospect that someone would want to move up for. Now, I'm going to answer this question in pieces because it gives me an opportunity to talk about my philosophy about how you build an effective run game, which obviously the Raiders did not last year at all. If you want to run the ball, your offensive line sets your floor and your running back sets your ceiling. We have seen that throughout history. There's a whole bunch of elite running backs that have given their teams average run games almost by themselves, but their ceiling as a team was an average run game solely because they have an elite running back. But you don't see a truly elite run game without the floor first getting raised by the offensive line. You have to build the floor first, and then you can put the house on top of it, and then you finish it off with a really nice, shiny roof, which in this case would be Saquon Barkley or Ashton Jeanty. And there are some numbers to back that up, by the way. If you go back to the Eagles' run game pre and post Saquon, and we have some charts to go with this as well. In 2023, their last year before Barkley came to town, they were third in the NFL in yards before contact per attempt, which is a measure of how well your offensive line displaces the defensive line and gives your running back room to work before they even get touched. That was 1.7 yards before contact per attempt. That's a really, really good number. And even though they were third in that number, they were 9th overall in yards per attempt at 4.4, which is solid but not spectacular. You swap that out for the 2024 chart, and you could see they were still elite in yards before contact per attempt because their offensive line was amazing. They were second in the NFL at 1.9. Though if you take out QB runs like the tush push and you just reduce it to only running back runs, they were at 2.2, which was first. But we'll just go with the overall number. They were second at 1.9, so even better than 2023. But their overall yards per attempt jumped up to also being second in the NFL at 5.2. That is a massive, massive difference. So their floor was still elite, but their ceiling got raised because they brought in a better running back than what they had in the past, which was Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift, and they were okay, but they weren't really equipped to maximize the great offensive line that this team had. Now, flip to the other side of the whole Saquon saga. Let's look at the Giants in 2017 before Saquon even got there. Back in 2017, they were pretty much dead middle in the NFL in terms of yards before contact per attempt, which is a baseline measure, again, of how good your offensive line is at run blocking. They were 14th at 1.4 yards per attempt, or 1.4 yards before contact per attempt, I should say. Now, even despite being an average run blocking line, they were below average in terms of yards per carry at just 4.0 flat. So their floor was decent. Their ceiling was really, really low because their running back room wasn't that good. Fast forward to Saquon's rookie year, they were still 15th in the NFL in terms of yards before contact per attempt, but they jumped all the way up to 6th in yards per carry at 4.7. So Saquon by himself raised their ceiling per attempt by 0.7 yards, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a lot. Like he single-handedly raised them from 19th to 6th in yards per carry with a similarly effective offensive line. As time went on in New York, though, their offensive line degraded, and I would say degraded quickly. And then eventually you got to 2023, his last year in New York, where they were 31st in the NFL in average yards before contact per attempt at 0.9. So he couldn't even get a yard past the line of scrimmage before somebody touched him. And obviously they were 29th in yards per attempt that year as well. So the floor was basically underground at that point, and Saquon did what he could, but it just wasn't working. Which is why the Giants were thinking, are we really going to pay a running back? Because our offensive line sucks so much that even arguably the best one in the NFL isn't making a difference. Now, taking all that information, and I understand it's a whole bunch of numbers I just threw at you and a bunch of nerdy math stuff, but I promise it does make sense. You can take that argument and then now translate that to the Raiders' position this year. And that's why there's a legitimate debate about if they should even consider taking Ashton Jeanty at 6. We can bring in that same chart that we already looked at from 2024, and you see the Raiders are basically on an island of suck all the way at the bottom left. So they're one of the worst run blocking teams in the NFL last season. They were only at 1.0 yards before contact per attempt. That was 26th in the league. And they were dead last in yards per carry overall at just 3.6. Now you can attribute that to, of course, having bad run blocking and a very low ceiling from a very, very, very below average running back room. So you would think, okay, well, you add Ashton Jeanty into that room, he raises their ceiling, but again, we get right back to the same argument of raises their ceiling by how much, right? If the offensive line still sucks. So the question the Raiders' new regime, and even I would say Raiders fans have to answer is the offensive line going to be better in 2025? Moving JPJ over to center and replacing Andre James, who in my opinion was the weak link on that offensive line and the reason why their run blocking sucked so much, does moving JPJ to center and then probably investing in a new starting left guard on day 2, is that enough to get this team into at least being an average run blocking line that Ashton Jeanty could pay off? I don't know. I truly don't know. But I do think it's an easy argument to make that Andre James not being there anymore is more addition by subtraction, because this team was literally dead last in terms of yards per carry and A-gap runs last year, and also dead last on B-gap runs, but hey, who's counting? But if you're looking at off-tackle runs, they were 12th. So it's not like they couldn't run the ball. They just couldn't run the ball inside, like basically at all. So again, new left guard, new center, new running back. Maybe that becomes a great run game. I have no idea. Again, I just think it comes down to having like a different philosophical approach here, but ultimately my philosophy is build the floor first, worry about the ceiling after that. We'll see what the Raiders do. Now, next question here from Connor. He asks, what do you think of the CBs in this year's class? Do you see many potential starters on day 2? Well, good news for you, Connor. I think I actually see more potential starters on day 2 than I do on day 1. And that's because a lot of the corners that are, at least the best corners that are in this class, are also coming off injury, which might push them into day 2. I'd be willing to bet that we actually have more guys drafted in the second round than the first round this year. And just in no particular order, I'll list them off here. Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, who is incredible, by the way. Like, kind of ignore the 2024 tape because he didn't play that many games. You go back to 2023, the last time he was truly healthy, before his second hip surgery and before his, I think, first shoulder surgery that was leading into 2024. But pre-surgery, you go back to 2023, Benjamin Morrison, he was probably a top 15 pick. That's how good his tape was. Other than Travis Hunter, who's kind of a everything player, if we're just talking about pure corners in this draft, he's probably the best one. Like, if I had to bet on any of them, it would be Benjamin Morrison. But again, we're talking about a guy who's had 2 hip surgeries and a shoulder surgery before he even gets to the NFL. So the medical red flag is real. I know he said he got cleared already and he's going to do his own private pro day in a couple weeks, but I would trust my team doctors on this one. If the doctor says, yes, he's going to be okay, I take him in the first round. If the doctor says, well, maybe, he's probably going to slip to maybe the late second round because, I don't know, a corner having multiple hip surgeries is kind of shaky to me. So it is possible that he's going to slip to day 2, I guess is what I'm saying, but he is a day 1 talent. And I guess we'll just see where he goes. He has one of the widest range of outcomes in this entire class. Next up, another round 2 corner, or at least likely round 2 corner. You could talk me into him in the back end of round 1, but we'll just have to see. But Trey Amos from Ole Miss, he's one of the more polished press man corners in this class. I think he's a good athlete, but not an elite athlete, but he has enough athleticism for me to not think he's going to get his doors blown off down the sideline by like true NFL speed outside. I think he wins with length and competitiveness more so than quick twitch or recovery speed. But boy, if you want a really solid, technically proficient press corner who immediately, like, you don't really have to coach him up that much. You can just throw him in the lineup and he's going to start for you and probably be effective. I think Trey Amos is your guy. We also have Savone Revel, who is a much, much freakier athlete than Amos, but he is coming off a torn ACL. But my God, the tools are just unreal. He and I would also say Darian Porter are in this mold of just 6'2", 200-ish pound corners with anywhere between 32 and a half and 33-inch arms. Legit speed, unreal ability to recover with the ball in the air when they do get beat. I think Porter's hips are better than Revel's, but I think Revel has better ball skills. And I know Revel also crushed every single interview he was in, and his cognitive testing was off the charts. So he's smart, he's athletic, he's long. Both him and Porter just take up a lot of space down the sideline. Like it's really, really hard to throw vertically on them. Because how are you going to fit a pass around a 6'2" corner that runs 4'3" something? It's really hard to do. So if you just want a pure outside corner that takes away the vertical game, even if both of them I think can, maybe, I don't want to say struggle, but I think kind of playing against shifty Z receivers in space is not necessarily their game. If you just want somebody who can match up against an X and beat the shit out of them, Darian Porter and Savon Revel on day 2 are your guys. We also have Azareye'h Thomas from Florida State, who I think very easily could go back end of round 1. I think he is very much in like a Joey Porter Jr. type of mold. So again, another long, aggressive physical press corner, but he's not as athletic as Amos, Revel, or Porter. In fact, he's probably the least athletic out of those 4. So it's possible he goes after those guys, but if we're just looking for like pure teach tape from a technical standpoint, he might be the most technically refined press corner out of any of these guys. So again, if you're looking for an outside corner that can start for you basically immediately because you don't have to coach him up at all, Azareye'h Thomas is another very, very, very high second round pick, potentially back end of first round pick. And then Kobe Bryant, let's talk about a non-press corner for once. He is much smaller, he's slender, but he's very instinctual, he's very rangy. I love him as a zone coverage defender. If you play, your defense field and boundary, which not every defense does in the NFL, it's more common in college because the hashes are wider, but some DCs in the pros tend to, when the ball's on the hash, they'll line up field and boundary. He's more your classic field side off corner that is going to complement, your big lanky press corner that's going to play on the boundary side. So if you're a defense that switches sides a lot on your DBs and you line up based on where the ball is and you need somebody who can be a really rangy instinctual zone corner to the field side, I think Kobe Bryant is your guy. And you're going to get him probably in the late third-ish round because, again, not very big, but boy, I just love how he plays. He reminds me a lot of Dane Jackson. So he's very like Buffalo Bills-ish, if I was going to give a comp. So again, overall, lots of day 2 corners are going to be available, and I think we're going to see a serious run at the position early in round 2. Next question here from Christopher Ho. Who is one player in this rookie class who was not invited to the combine that we should keep tabs on during day 2 and or day 3 of the draft? I will give you 4, actually. First up, we have Thomas Perry, the offensive lineman from Middlebury. Yes, we have a player from Middlebury in the draft this year, and he is really good. Nicknamed Thomas the Tank because he looks like a tank. He's very athletic. Like, he has an NFL build, even though he's coming from the D3 level. And he showed up at Shrine Bowl going against a bunch of, SEC and Big Ten talent. And he kind of kicked their ass. Like, I'm not going to lie. He was really, really good in one-on-ones. I have no idea why he didn't get invited to the combine because that's the exact kind of event that would benefit him, both to get a whole bunch of team interviews in as well as like true testing on his athleticism. He looked really athletic to me when I was watching him practice in person, but again, I would have loved to get actual numbers on him. But Thomas Perry definitely will be drafted somewhere on day 3 out of Middlebury. We also have Shamari Simmons, the nickel from ASU. Well, nickel/safety. I think it could be either one. But I love him as a run defending nickel and pass rushing nickel. Like, he's a great blitzer, great tackler, super physical when he's discarding blocks. I think he is adequate in coverage. I don't think he's as good in coverage as a lot of the other top tier nickels in this draft, whether it's Jahdae Barron. Well, Barron could also play outside, but let's be honest, at nickel, he's basically Trent McDuffie. And then you also have Elijah Huzzy, who I think is better in coverage. I would say Jacob Parrish, if you want to slide him inside, is better in coverage than Shamari Simmons. But boy, he plays the run and he blitzes probably better than most other nickels in this class, and he did not get invited to the combine. I don't know why. Esa Pole, also not invited to the combine. I thought he was the most impressive offensive tackle at the Shrine Bowl, and his statistical profile at Wazoo is also really, really impressive. He gave up one of the lowest pressure rates in all of college football, and that's among all offensive tackles at every level. So we're talking, 450, 460 teams. He was top 15, if I recall, in pressure percentage allowed. He's a former basketball player who came to playing football later in life, so he's still learning the sport, but his feet are tremendous. He's got great core strength, and I love him. I really do. So if you're looking for like a day 3 gem at offensive tackle that I think you could bring in and he could immediately hold up in pass pro, Esa Pole, Washington State. And then rounding it out here, we have Elijah Ponder from Cal Poly, the edge rusher out of Cal Poly, one of the most athletic edges in this entire class. He first caught my eye, not this draft cycle, but last draft cycle. So I've been waiting for him to come out for a while, knowing that he was a freak of nature, and he is definitely a freak of nature. So I don't know why he didn't go to the combine, or rather wasn't invited to the combine, because I think he would have lit that up. Again, we're looking at somebody with a sub 7.3 cone. He had an elite shuttle. I want to say he was like 11 feet in the broad and 40 plus on the vert. If I recall correctly, it was 41 to be exact, which again, over 250 pounds, hitting 41 in the vert is beyond rare. And recently we put together kind of a compound of thresholds for what the athleticism looks like for your average top 10 edge in the NFL in terms of pressures generated. So we looked at the top 10 pressure getters in each of the last 10 seasons, and we took their average measurements for things like height, weight, arm length, 10-yard split, vert, broad, 3-cone, shuttle, and I think overall RAS, right? And again, we did that for 10 straight years, and then we also did an average of the average to see what your typical elite pass rusher looks like in the last decade. And I'll read those numbers off to you right now. It's usually about 6'3.5", 262, with an arm length of 33.5, a 10-yard split of 163, a 3-cone of 702, a shuttle of 429, a vert of 34.5, a broad of 9'11", which surprised me. I figured it would have been over 10, but it's only about 9'11", and then an RAS of 877. Ponder is one of the only 8 edge rushers in this entire class to meet those thresholds in at least half the categories. Like, this is actually a really rare athletic profile, to the point where most of the guys in this class don't even sniff it. Elijah Ponder does, and he didn't go to the combine, even though he was really productive and really athletic. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. He should have gotten an invite. But either way, Elijah Ponder, look for him to go on day 3 solely because of competition level, but I think there's something there. There's a lot of tools. Next question. This comes from Evan Storty. Hi, Brett. Big fan of the YouTube channel since 2020. So you've been here for a while. Appreciate that, Evan. His question reads, in regards to scouting receivers, what aspects of a receiver do you like to look for which deviates from the usual consensus at the position? Thank you, man, and all the best. All the best to you as well, Evan. And I will answer your question in just 1 second, because I want to remind everybody that we're in the middle of draft season right now. So we're watching tape on like 250-ish guys, minimum 3 tapes, or 3 games, I should say, per prospect, sometimes 4, 5, or 6, if it's a particularly hard eval. And we're also doing pro days and recording podcasts and doing interviews, and it's a busy time, not gonna lie. Like, this is the busiest time of the year for me, which I didn't expect when I started doing this job a decade ago, but draft season is a whole different animal. And because of that, I don't really have time to be a normal, fully functioning adult that goes to grocery stores and meal preps and cooks myself food 3 times a day. It's just not really possible in this 2 to 3 month period of the year where all hell breaks loose. And that's why, truly, I'm not bullshitting you on this, I rely heavily on Factor every single spring. Factor, if you don't know already, is one of our longest running partners on this channel, and they ship fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals right to your doorstep. All the meals can be heated up in the microwave in just 2 minutes. They taste great. There's a ton of variety, so you never get bored. I'm talking over 35 different meal options per week with more than 60 add-on options, including breakfast, snacks, and beverages. So at least for me, it takes a lot of the stresses out of grocery shopping and meal prepping. I mean, literally and figuratively, it takes it off my plate. So if you're also going through it right now until we get to the promised land of late April, and you want to get some meals that can be made fast, eaten conveniently, and still be tasty, all delivered right to your door, I encourage you to check out Factor. Go to factor75.com, use promo code 50FilmRoom, and that will get you 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box. Again, that is factor75.com, use promo code 50FilmRoom. You'll get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box. Thank you once again to Factor for sponsoring today's show. And with that, let's get back to talking about some receivers here, because for me, I tend to look at archetypes more so than trying to grade receivers in a vacuum. Like, it's almost too hard for me to compare different receivers stylistically and how I value a slot versus an X versus Z. So again, it can be difficult to stack guys because of that. So I more look at it in terms of what role does my football team need and who in the class fits that role the best. As an example, if my team needs an X receiver, like a classic X receiver archetype, notice I didn't say number one receiver, because just because you're an X doesn't mean you're a true number one. I know that's the case a lot of the time, but there's plenty of teams where their number one is going to be their Z, or like a power slot in Cooper Kupp's case back in the day. Just because you're an X doesn't mean you're first in the pecking order. And I would even say in the Rams right now, even though Puka's not going to be the X for them, he's still first in the pecking order. Like, just because Devontae's coming in and playing X doesn't mean he's going to get the majority of the targets. We're just talking about role here. But if I'm a team that already has a really good slot receiver or a really good Z receiver who's my number one, and I need an X, that's a different archetype. The X receiver is going to be the guy on the line of scrimmage, fighting against press corners, winning at the release, and being a ball winner in the air. Like, they're going to have to be able to win contested catches, because that's the job. Like, your job is to get down the sideline, fight for body positioning, and give your quarterback a chance to win those one-on-ones down the sideline. Like, you are the guy for that. You know, Z receivers, they're going to be moving all over the field and running a wide variety of routes. You know, slot receivers, honestly, there's like 4 different archetypes of slot receivers at this point. There's vertical slots like Taylor Gabriel, where they're a deep threat, but they run their routes from the inside. You have power slots that are insert blockers like the aforementioned Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua, that, yeah, they're a slot receiver, but also they could play fullback, because of course they can. Like, that's a whole separate archetype. You have gadget guys that are slot receivers like Tavon Austin. And then you have, you know, the archetype of slot receiver that I think most people think of slot receivers as, and I just call them captain choice route, like a Wes Welker or a Julian Edelman. There's so many different types of slot receivers now. Some of them can be your number one. Some of them are going to be, you know, we bring him in for 15 snaps a game and he catches 2 balls for 50 yards and gets us a chunk play, and that's it. And then, you know, sometimes it's your gadget guy, where we're actually giving him more carries than we are giving him receptions. So again, it all comes down to the type of role you want. Do you need an X? Do you need a Z? Do you need one of the 5 different types of slot receivers that we see in the NFL these days? I don't think you can really stack receivers in a vacuum, you know, based on overall grade, because every team is going to have different needs and different roles that they need filled, which is why sometimes we see receivers go earlier than others that we wouldn't think that they're quote unquote better prospects, but they're better fits for that team. And ultimately, that is what matters. So when I am grading receivers, I am more grading them within their archetype. And then when I'm trying to do a mock draft, I look at what archetype that team needs and I draft accordingly. Next question here from Max, either Bazin or Bazin, whichever one that is, please let me know in the comments, because I don't want to mess up your name. Let's just say Max. How many players from this year's class would you consider to be first round caliber? I like this question a lot, Max, so I appreciate you for sending it in, because the dirty little secret around the NFL is that almost never will you see 32 first round grades in a single draft class. In fact, most teams typically are only going to have between like 15 and 25 true first round grades, which is why sometimes you tend to see a whole bunch of trades in the back end of the first, because the difference between the players that are going to go in the back end of the first and even the players, especially in this class, that are going to go in the back end of the second is virtually non-existent. Like, for me personally, I only have 19 true first round grades in this class that are not quarterbacks. I kind of grade quarterbacks on a curve. So like, I'll take Cam Ward in the first round, but as far as non-quarterbacks go, as of right now, I have 19 true first-round grades and then double that number that can go anywhere between the end of the first round and pick 60, I would say, right? And that's the case for most teams as well. And that's why we always see weird stuff happen on the end of day one, because all these guys, their grades are just right next to each other. So for me, my non-quarterback first round grades in this class are in no particular order, even though it's going to look like there's an order. This is not really an order. Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Ashton Genty, Jade Barron, Tyler Warren, Malachi Starks, Matthew Golden, Tetairoa McMillan, Kelvin Banks, Armand Membu, Will Campbell, and Josh Simmons, because he just had his pro day and he looked pretty good, so I'm assuming the medicals are going to check out just fine. Kenneth Grant, Jahad Campbell, Omarion Hampton, Derek Harmon, Mason Graham, Walter Nolan, and Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Now, small caveat here. If Benjamin Morrison gets a clean medical sheet, he is also a first round grade for me, but I don't have that information, so we'll see. But he is a first round grade on tape, just going back and looking at the 2023 season. So let's call it 20. How about that? 20 first round grades in this class, which is probably about average if we're looking at the usual amount of first round grades that you're going to see from year to year. And I'd be willing to bet that some teams might even have less than that because of their constraints that they have in terms of athletic thresholds or character stuff or medical stuff or system fits. There's some teams that probably only have 15, 16 guys that are rated as first round prospects. So I'd be willing to bet that we're going to see a bunch of trades in the back end of the first, because teams are going to be trying to get out of there because they think they're going to get a similarly graded player 10 picks later early on day two. So yeah, that's my prediction for the draft, I guess you could say. Expect trades. Okay, final question for this episode. Not the final question I'm answering, by the way, because all the other questions on Patreon that got submitted, I will be going through and answering those as well on the Patreon. But as far as the final question for this public Q&A comes from AJG. He says, "Hey Brett, what would you say is more likely for the Eagles when it comes to 32? Moving up to secure a higher tier player, given how many picks they have this year and next year. They have 4/5 this year somehow. A bundle of late day 2 and early day 3 next year, or staying put at 32. If they do move up, who are the players you think they could target in the early 20s or so?" I'm going to try not to get too deep down the rabbit hole on this, because it probably deserves its own mini documentary about how the Eagles play by their own rules when it comes to the salary cap and everything that they do. But the short version is, Jeffrey Lurie sold an 8% stake in the Eagles to raise over $600 million in capital so that he can keep paying out all these option bonuses to players and shoving their cap hits into void years. And there's a cap time bomb that's going to go off in 2029, and they don't care. Because by then, if they win 2 to 3 championships by 2029, who cares? They're going to have to tear it all down anyway, and they don't give a shit. So they're spending and spending and spending at a level that I just don't think any other owner wants to do, because it's very expensive to keep having to pay cash to these guys up front by converting their salary to signing bonuses over and over and over again. And the only way you can really do that, especially having, 2 top of market contracts at offensive tackle and receiver and running back and of course quarterback, the only way you can get away with this is A, having an owner crazy enough to do it, and B, having a GM who's good enough at drafting to do it. The Eagles have the cheapest elite defense in the NFL. Jalen Carter is on a rookie deal. Nolan Smith is on a rookie deal. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Nakobe Dean, assuming he comes back from injury okay, rookie deal. Jordan Davis, rookie deal. Last year, Zach Bond was cheap. Now he's not, but he was cheap last year. Milton Williams and Josh Sweat were cheap. Now they're gone because they're expensive. And, they should have gotten paid, and I'm glad they got paid, but the only way they were able to offset the cost going into their offense and the way they structured these contracts is by drafting really well on defense. And so I think that the Eagles should not be looking to go up in the draft. They should be looking to stay put, because they need to keep drafting cheap talent that can contribute. They need as many picks as they can get, because when you have this many top of market deals, the only way that you can kind of even out that spending is to have a whole bunch of rookie contracts and, more importantly, contributors on rookie contracts. Now, whether or not they trade back from 32 is anyone's guess. It kind of depends on who's on the board for them. And that 5th-year option is really, really valuable if they get 5 years of contract control at, say, a premium position, whether it's pass rusher, offensive line, receiver, whatever. Like, that 5th year of control is really, really important. So I think they might stick at 32 for that reason, but I don't think they're going to go up. If anything, they're going to go down, and they're just going to keep accumulating picks because it is the only way that they can kind of keep this house of cards up right now. And I respect it. Like, I love how the Eagles have built their team because it just takes insane confidence and belief to even attempt something like this, but it worked. Like, they won a Super Bowl and they won it very convincingly, and they have set themselves up to do it at least one more time, maybe 2 more times before this whole thing kind of blows up. So like, I'm a firm believer that if you're in a window, you should capitalize on that window, and the Eagles are doing that better than maybe any team that I've seen ever. Honestly, like this roster is just sick. So again, the Eagles play by their own rules. I'll probably make a very, very, very deep dive into that later this offseason, but I love it. I love what they do. And I don't think you should expect any other team to do the same thing, because it is, quite frankly, batshit crazy. Okay, fun question to end this show on. Again, I want to thank every single patron who submitted questions. Rest assured, I will be going through the Patreon and answering as many of those. Not as many of those. I will be answering all of them. Trust me. But I'm going to be answering as many of them as I can tonight, and then hopefully by the end of tomorrow, I'll be able to get all of them done. So again, thank you for submitting questions, and thank you for being a patron and kind of keeping the lights on over the last few months. I know content has been slow on this channel, but I have been working on stuff. It's just all taken a long time to make because it's really, really cool, and I think you guys are going to appreciate it when it finally comes out. So again, thank you for your patience and belief in me. I could not do this without any of you. And yeah, draft is almost here. I'll see you guys very soon because the mock draft special is coming out in a few weeks. Later.